The courtroom doors slammed open. Flashbulbs exploded as Jasmine Carter stepped into the California sun, her husband Michael beside her, and their 20-year-old son Landon walking tall. Behind them, billionaire Ethan Callahan stormed out, jaw clenched, humiliated. Reporters swarmed. "Mr. Callahan, why did your son reject your name?" Landon turned to face the cameras, calm and unapologetic. "Because I already have a father," he said, locking eyes with Michael. Ethan froze. In that moment, legacy meant nothing. Bloodline had lost a love. If you're someone who believes love is earned, not inherited, this story will break your heart and put it back together again. It's a tale of betrayal, strength, redemption, and what it truly means to be a parent. So before you scroll away, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay with us. Because what happened between Jasmine, Ethan, and Landon will stay with you long after the credits roll. Let's go back 20 years, to the day everything changed. Back then, Ethan Callahan had the world at his feet. A 35-year-old tech billionaire from San Francisco, he was handsome, brilliant, and ruthless. Investors adored him. Tabloids followed him, and his name was whispered in boardrooms like prophecy. But for all his power, Ethan had one weakness: Jasmine Carter. She was 21, a gifted jazz singer from Oakland with fire in her eyes and soul in her voice. Their worlds clashed. His was built on control, hers on freedom. And for a brief moment, love lived somewhere between their differences. Until reality came knocking in the cruelest way. Jasmine never imagined a man like Ethan would fall for her. He was from money. She was raised by a single mother who scrubbed floors to pay bills. But somehow they fit. For nearly a year, they danced between weekends in Napa Valley and nights in Oakland jazz bars. She loved him quietly, deeply, almost painfully. But as the months passed, she noticed something slipping. His calls came less often, his visits grew shorter, and the warmth that once held her close turned cold, replaced with silence, scheduled conflicts, and half-hearted promises. When she finally told Ethan she was pregnant, she expected shock, maybe fear, but not disgust. "You're serious?" he said, his voice flat. "Jasmine, we barely even see each other anymore." She swallowed hard. "Because you've been pulling away, Ethan." "Not me." He stared at her like a stranger. "I can't have a kid right now. My father would destroy this, and who's to say it's even mine?" That one sentence shattered her. Her voice cracked. "How dare you?" But he didn't apologize. He paced. He ranted. And then finally he said it. "I want you gone." Their last night together was a war zone of broken trust. Jasmine fought through tears, reminding him of every moment they shared. Ethan didn't care. He was drowning in fear. Fear of his powerful father's rejection. Fear of scandal. Fear that Jasmine had already moved on emotionally. He said things no woman should ever hear from someone she once loved. And when she grabbed her bag and slammed the door behind her, she wasn't just walking away from a man. She was walking away from a version of herself that believed in him. The next morning, Ethan filed for divorce. They were never married, but he wanted it on record. Jasmine Carter was no longer associated with the Callahan name. His legal team spun the story, whispered rumors into social circles, and buried the truth. Jasmine's name vanished from articles. Her pregnancy was never mentioned. Just like that, she became invisible. Alone, jobless, and pregnant at 22, Jasmine returned to Oakland with nothing but a suitcase and a determination not to break. Oakland became her healing ground. Jasmine gave birth in a small public hospital, naming her son Landon. Her mother, a retired nurse, helped when she could. Jasmine juggled part-time work, night classes, and diaper changes. Life was hard, but not hopeless. When Landon was 4, Jasmine met someone new. Michael Bennett, a compassionate school counselor who didn't flinch at her past. He listened. He stayed. And when he looked at Landon, he didn't see someone else's child. He saw his own. Jasmine never asked him to be a father. He just became one. Michael wasn't rich like Ethan, but he was stable, respected, and deeply grounded. He owned a small educational consulting firm and volunteered in youth mentorship programs. What he lacked in flash, he made up for in presence. Birthdays, first words, school plays, late-night stomach bugs. He was there. By the time Landon turned 8, the word Dad belonged to Michael alone. Jasmine didn't hide the truth from Landon, but she didn't need to explain much. Love explained everything. 20 years passed. Landon grew into a brilliant, kind, and focused young man, an honor student and self-taught jazz pianist. He carried Jasmine's soul and Michael's wisdom. He'd never met Ethan, never searched for him, never needed to, but across the Golden Gate, in his glass tower regret. Ethan Callahan would soon discover the son he abandoned was not just alive, but thriving. And suddenly, legacy meant everything to a man who once threw it away. Ethan Callahan wasn't the kind of man who looked back until his empire began to crack. At 55, his company faced board and betrayals and shareholder threats. His father had died 3 years earlier, and Ethan felt alone in a world he once dominated. Then one night, as he scrolled past a local news story about an Oakland youth mentorship program, his heart stopped. There, standing beside a beaming Jasmine, was a young man with his exact jawline. "No, it can't be," he whispered, zooming in. But it could. Landon wasn't just real. He was thriving without him. For weeks, Ethan spiraled. He hired a private investigator. Within days, he had birth records, school transcripts, even photos of Michael picking up Landon from a prep school in Berkeley. Everything confirmed it. The boy was his biological son. But what stung most, Landon had Michael's last name. No mention of Callahan. No connection to the fortune, the name, the bloodline. To Ethan, this wasn't just abandonment. It was theft. Fueled by regret and ego, Ethan made a decision. "We're filing for legal paternal rights," he told his lawyer. "He's my heir, and I want him acknowledged publicly and legally." His attorney hesitated. "But Mr. Callahan, you've had no contact for 2 decades. The court may see this as opportunistic." Ethan slammed his hand on the desk. "He's mine. He carries my blood, and I won't let another man, especially some school counselor, claim what belongs to me." And just like that, the legal war began. Weeks later in Oakland, the knock on the door came just after dinner. Jasmine opened it to find a process server holding a thick envelope. She didn't need to read it to know what it meant. "He's coming for Landon," she whispered. Michael took the papers gently. "Let him try," he said. "We've raised that boy with love, not greed." Jasmine felt a cold wave of anger rise inside her. He ignored us for 20 years. Now he wants to play father. Michael nodded. "Then we fight like a family." When Landon heard the news, his face went blank. "He wants custody?" Jasmine nodded slowly. "Legal acknowledgement. Probably visitation. Maybe more." Landon didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just stood, as if processing the absurdity of it all. "Why now?" he asked quietly. "Because he has no one else," Michael replied. "And he thinks you're his second chance." Landon looked out the window. Well, he missed the first 20. The courtroom smelled like leather and silence. Ethan sat beside his attorneys, dressed in an expensive navy suit, watching as Jasmine and Michael entered holding hands. Landon followed behind them, stoic, unreadable. The judge entered. The room stood. What followed were hours of testimony. Ethan's team argued bloodline legacy rights. Jasmine's lawyer spoke of abandonment, absence, and emotional harm. Michael's words pierced deepest. "I never asked to be his father, but I showed up every day, and I earned that title." Ethan didn't flinch, but his jaw tightened. Recess at the courthouse. Outside the courtroom, reporters hounded all sides. Ethan spoke briefly. "I'm not here to erase anyone. I just want to build a future with my son." Jasmine watched him from across the marble floor. "You had that chance," she said under her breath. "You chose your pride instead." Inside the hallway, Landon sat alone on a bench. A reporter approached, but he held up his hand. "I'm not ready to talk," he said. "This isn't about media. This is about choices, his and mine." The next day, it was Landon's turn to take the stand. The judge asked if he wanted a relationship with Ethan. He paused, looked at Michael, then back at Ethan. "I've forgiven him," Landon said softly. But I can't give him something he didn't fight for 20 years ago. I already have a dad, and I don't need two. His words echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Final verdict. 2 days later, the judge's ruling was clear. Jasmine and Michael retained full parental rights. Ethan Callahan was granted no legal authority over Landon. However, if Landon chose to build a business relationship with him, the court wouldn't block it. Ethan's face remained blank, but something in his eyes broke. For the first time, he wasn't a man in control. He was just a man who lost everything because he refused to stay. As the courtroom emptied, Jasmine hugged Landon, tears falling silently. Michael placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "You did good." Outside, reporters swarmed. Ethan stood a few feet from them, alone. Landon walked past him without a glance, then paused. "We can talk about business sometime," he said flatly, "but I'm not a Callahan. I'm my father's son." He turned to Michael and walked away. Ethan returned to his penthouse alone. The city lights shimmered through his windows, but he felt none of their warmth. For the first time in decades, the silence wasn't peaceful, it was punishing. He poured a drink he didn't touch and stared at a framed photo of himself at 35, young and untouchable. But he no longer saw a visionary. He saw a coward, a man who ran from love and lost everything real. Jasmine was right. He had chosen pride. Now pride was all he had, and it was as empty as the whiskey glass he couldn't bring to his lips. In Oakland, life resumed with quiet dignity. Jasmine and Michael kept things steady. No public interviews, no celebration. Just family dinners, music in the kitchen, and peace. Landon, still processing everything, returned to college, choosing to major in business, not for Ethan, but for himself. He kept Ethan's card in the drawer, untouched. "One day," he told Michael, "I might work with him, but he'll never have what you do. You raised me. You taught me to be enough." Michael smiled, placing a hand on his shoulder. "And you've always been more than enough, son." 6 months later, a letter arrived at Jasmine's doorstep. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. Inside, a single-page note from Ethan. "I was wrong. About you. About everything. Thank you for raising him with strength and grace. I won't ask for anything. I just needed to say, I'm sorry." Jasmine sat at the kitchen table, reading the words again. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply folded the letter and tucked it into the back of her Bible. A closed chapter, not a reopening. Meanwhile, Ethan began showing up differently. He started attending therapy. Quietly, not for public image, but for truth. For the first time in his life, he asked hard questions. Why did I walk away? Why did I wait so long? Who taught me love was a transaction? The answers weren't easy, but they were necessary. He stopped chasing Landon and started focusing on himself. And slowly, Ethan learned that being a father required more than money. It required presence. Painfully, he accepted he couldn't rewrite the past. But maybe, just maybe, he could become a better man in the future. Landon kept moving forward. With Jasmine's wisdom and Michael's foundation, he started an educational nonprofit for underserved kids. He called it Legacy First, not because of Ethan's name, but because of Michael's example. He gave free workshops, taught leadership, and built programs for teens who felt invisible. Ethan heard about it from a business blog. He never called, never intruded. He simply donated, anonymously, $500,000. Landon found out, said nothing, but smiled. It was the first time Ethan had ever given without expecting anything back. And that was enough for now. 1 year later, Berkeley Event Hall, Landon stood behind a microphone in a sleek black suit, accepting an award for community leadership. Michael and Jasmine sat in the front row, beaming. As applause filled the room, Landon cleared his throat. "I want to thank the two people who never walked away," he said. "My mother, who raised me on strength, and my father, who showed me what showing up looks like." He pointed toward Michael. The audience clapped louder. Off to the side, unnoticed by most, Ethan stood in the back, watching. And for the first time, the tears in his eyes weren't for himself. They were for growth. After the event, Landon found him outside beneath the lights. "You were there," he said, not surprised. Ethan nodded. "I didn't want to interrupt." Landon stared at him for a long moment. "We can talk soon. But this night wasn't about you." Ethan nodded again. No pride left his posture. "I know, and I'm proud of you anyway." Landon extended his hand. Not for closure, for understanding. Ethan shook it gently. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. But it was a start. One man letting go. Another man growing up. One final visit. Years later, Jasmine visited her mother's grave. She stood silently, flowers in hand, reflecting on all the pain they'd endured. "We made it, Mama," she whispered. "He's okay. We're okay." Michael joined her a moment later. No words, just presence. Their hands found each other. Two people who built something real from ruin. Two people who were never supposed to meet, but who saved each other anyway. "I think she'd be proud," Michael said. Jasmine nodded, eyes glassy. "Of you, of Landon, and maybe of the choices I made." In the distance, wind stirred the leaves like a quiet applause. Ethan never remarried. He stepped back from his company, traveled, volunteered at mentorship programs under different names. He gave talks, not about business, but about regret. His name faded from headlines, but his legacy shifted in private. Landon invited him once a year to lunch. That was all, and it was enough. Sometimes silence is not punishment. It's permission to begin again on smaller terms. Ethan understood that now. He had lost the right to fatherhood, but not the right to humility. And in that quiet truth, he finally found peace. In the end, it wasn't the Callahan fortune that shaped Landon. It wasn't blood, wealth, or scandal. It was a consistent love of a mother who never gave up and a father who never walked away. Landon became a man with both fire and grace, not because of what he inherited, but because of who showed up. Ethan watched from the sidelines, not as a patriarch, but as a man humbled by truth. And though he couldn't rewrite the past, he became a living reminder that some stories aren't meant to be reclaimed, just respected from a distance.